Hey everyone, it's Will, GamerDad, with another video for you. So the update is in-game, so don't look at the App Store or the Play Store. Just make sure you reset your game. It just came out now. And so in tonight's episode of Should You Summon, we'll discuss the updated banners that we have for this particular update, which is 2.11.700. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. I also do have a Patreon account for those who want to support me this way. So, of course, the featured unit in this particular conclusion of the 3,000 year arc is AS Milsha. And so we'll discuss the Fatefuls and then the regular banner. And of course, I'll focus my description and my discussions on AS Milsha. So first of all, as hinted, we do have the Trio of the Moon and Sea Edition Fateful, 3 times max. And so note that it is very similar to most Fatefuls. However, instead of having only 10% upgraded for one unit, that is the AS Milsha, we are 10% upgraded for the 3 singers currently available in the game. So Milsha AS, Pisaka, as well as Mystere AS. And note that these are the AS versions, so other than Pisaka, so you don't have to upgrade it. You get the upgraded one on the singing version and not the regular version. Note that the regular version is only 0.02%. And of course, being that this is a paid banner, you have all the updated units here, including things like, I guess, ES Suzette, as well as AS, let's see, Otaha. Of course, we also have the altar units as well. All right. So we also do have the regular Fateful encounter as well. Let's see. Here. Now this one is only one try. And again, this one does have upgraded 0.4.8 for the normal style on pulls 1 to 9. On pulls 10, it upgrades the AS version to 10%, just like normal banners. And of course, same thing, it'll have the same batch of units available as the other Faithful, except that this one has upgraded of 3 singers instead of just 1. And finally, for those who are free to play or want to spend paid stones on the regular banner, you do have this banner as well. Being that this is the full rate up for Milsha in any form, you do have the 0.4 and 4 for the 4.5, 0.8 for the normal style, and 0.8 for the AS style, for a total chance of 2% for any form of Milsha. You've heard me preach onwards about grinding out treatises if you hit any version, and that's considered a win, so not too bad. So just a reminder to temper your expectations in any banner, even a dedicated banner like this. I believe a 4K summon session would roughly equal about 2/3 chance of getting Milsha in any form. Now, of course, the free version doesn't have all the newest units. However, it still has a lot of the more powerful units that have been released, such as all the altar units and so on and so forth. However, note that, for example, AS Otaha is not here. All right, so if you missed my patch notes yesterday video, the AS Milsha is our 3rd singer. She also VCs in to deploy a new zone called Moonlight Zone or Moonlight Stance. And what that does is it increases the damage of all the lunar elements, that is thunder or lightning, shade, as well as crystal by 30%. And it decreases all the regular 4 elements, which is earth, water, wind, and fire, by 30%. So very similar to weapon zones in the sense, although it allows you to tie together a lot of your specialized lunar element units. Now, why would you want to do that, you may ask? Obviously, it can increase the damage of it, and this is where AS Milsha shines, and she is very unique compared to the other 2 singers so far in the game. Now, unlike the other 2 singers that are much more ubiquitous, they can be plugged into many different units, and they have very straightforward, high-powered abilities such as break status, increased damage, decreased damage, healing, blah, 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 blah. AS Mystere has an end of turn damage, dual debuff that can increase in effectiveness over time. You get the point. Both of those singers are extremely powerful in their own right, although they are slightly different. Now, AS Milsha is a little bit different. Instead of having her main DPS effects with her normal style, she sings Not only does she deploy zone when she VCs in, she now has songs that basically allow you to add the effects of different lunatic shade abilities to your party. Now, so one song, for example, does 50% less damage to your team. If you take 1,000 damage or less in any single hit, it'll reduce that damage to 0. So a very unique ability in reducing damage as opposed to some barriers like 50% damage reduction, such as Oratorio from Pizzica. This also gives Lunatic Scrap on all party members. So remember that Scrap is one of the 2 shade abilities, very similar to Aestilili. I know they renamed it, but this one basically does self-damage in order to do additional damage on the enemies. So basically what that means is when she's singing, all your units will gain abilities similar to Aestilili, where you self-damage and do additional damage to the enemies. And not only that, it guarantees crit rate to 100% for all magic or regular type attacks. Pretty good. Obviously, in that if you can build your team the right way, you can really enhance your damage. Now, obviously, in the case of Scrap, you're sacrificing the ability of, I guess, a more straightforward strategy to where you're adding damage at the cost of self-damaging your applicable units while AS Milsha is singing. Her other song is also very unique, so instead of the defensive nature where you get 50% less damage, you increase damage by 50% for all your party members up front, and this one gives hold ground to all party members while HP is full. And this effect is continuous unless your HP is not full. So very similar to the badge, except that as long as you can heal or maintain full HP, and there's definitely a number of ways to do that. I'm sure you can think of different ideas such as badges, regen, peer healers, and so on and so forth. This one applies Lunatic Sacrifice instead of Lunatic Scrap. So again, increases your damage at the cost of converting your defensive stats to your offensive stats. So I believe Spirit would become, for example, Magic Attack, which is Int, and Endurance, which is your physical defense, will be converted to Power. So you really can power up your team if you build the right strategy. Now, should you summon? So, as I alluded to earlier, AS Milsha is a very unique unit that gives you a unique zone, and she can really power up your team. However, like I hinted earlier, she seems a lot more complex in building certain strategies that really take advantage of this lunatic kind of ability. Now, of course, you can definitely put together appropriate teams or units that can benefit from this. And keep in mind that one other benefit of these songs is that for units that have Lunatic that increase damage based on the fact that it says, when in Lunatic, do this or do that, this song will help you maintain Lunatic basically indefinitely as long as she is singing. So you get those benefits, and so a lot of Lunatic type units get basically their Lunatic abilities and damages can stay at the high multiplier as long as she is singing. And of course, being that it is a zone, it'll allow all your Lunatic units to be tied together. Remember that for the most part, anyone who has the Thunder / Shade or Crystal, they're usually Lunatic units on its own right. They do benefit from these kind of songs in the fact that you can kind of build a team around that. Now, conversely, keep in mind that by the same token, Lunatic units generally have 2 elements. One, which is one of those, aforementioned 3 elements, and of course the basic 4 element as well. For example, Aestilili has Fire as well as Shade. She is a good unit in the fact that she has both equally. She's equally comfortable using Shade DPS or Fire DPS. But for some units, for example, their regular elemental damage is higher than their lunar elemental damage. And keep in mind that this zone will decrease those DPS effects by 30%. So plan accordingly in building a team if you want to really take advantage of AS Milsha's unique ability. Now, there is some talk, obviously, that if you have looked into JP in the future, and yes, this is a spoiler, there are units in the future that will be able to establish Thunder Zone. That means you can have an all Thunder type team, which will benefit and charge the AF bar and so on and so forth by using Thunder type moves. And there is a unit in JP that can also create Crystal Zone, where your Crystal units are going to charge the bar much faster. You can argue that this zone may do things differently than those two zones. However, unless you have a really comprehensive roster, I feel that you're going to have a tough time taking full advantage of a zone such as Moonlight Zone. Not to say it's bad, but it feels very niche and, like I said, complicated in the fact that you probably need a widespread roster to really take advantage of it. I mean, you can plug whatever you want into it technically. Even Aldo technically can go into it, and you're increasing his damage by, X amount of percent with the Lunatic, Sacrifice, or Scrap. But keep in mind, if he's only does one type of elemental damage like fire, guess what? His damage is going to be reduced by 30% in that zone, in which case, why are you using his unit like that? That's what I mean by you probably have to have a pretty comprehensive roster with a lot of Lunatic units to take advantage of their high DPS. For example, Eva would be a great choice if you wanted to do that. Or Lily the AS, for example, I mentioned her. There's other ones that you can imagine in using those Lunatic. ES Melina, for example, would obviously benefit. There's lots and lots of choices there in the units. Even the Alter units, many of them are Lunatic, and so will benefit greatly by these kind of songs. But conversely, there are conditions by which some of these songs work, and so again, it is a much more difficult strategy to build that. So if you have a very comprehensive roster and you want to take full advantage of a unique zone by which you can build a team, do lots of cool things and increase those lunar type damage, go for it. For most of us who have a less comprehensive roster, I feel it's hard to take advantage of it, and so I would consider her a not must summon, not a 10 out of 10 banner. If you want to add her, great. I think it can give you a lot of versatility and some unique strategies. However, I think the future zones from Japan will probably be a lot more straightforward to use, and being that, if you think about it, there aren't that many enemies or bosses so far that are vulnerable or weak to the 3 lunar elements. I mean, you could say like Unseen, for example. There are other elements out there, but even Manifest, for example, resist those 3 lunar elements. A lot of the endgame bosses, some of them are vulnerable, some of them are not. So keep that in mind when deciding to invest in a unit like AS Milsha. One last thing I want to mention. Again, based on what we know with future banners with Japan, there are a lot of powerful units coming up. I would consider this kind of era very similar to the era about 9 months ago when we had unit after unit being extremely powerful. For example, right around the time of Tales from the East, do you remember that time when we had AS Tsubami come out, Nakoko, ES Sikia, then Garam, and AS Miyunfa, and so on and so forth? Depending on how many stones you have there, you're not going to be able to spread out all those stones and guarantee to get high rates of getting the featured unit each and every time. And so most of you are probably in the same situation as myself. Very few stones, or less than 10,000 stones. And, if you summon everything here, that means you won't have the ability to summon for one of those 2 new zone units in the future, or if a surprise uprated banner such as a 5% banner like the altars we see pop up. So in conclusion, not a must-have. I think you would get along just fine without using AS Milsha or her unique abilities. However, hey, she can definitely unlock some cool strategies, and if you have the skills and abilities with the high-end roster, I think you can take great advantage of using her. So let me know in the comments below what you think about AS Milsha. Are you planning to summon or not? Again, I've heard many of you already comment on that, and as you know, I do have normal style already, and so as a free-to-play, we are going to grind out those treatises like I always recommend to you. That being said, no matter what happens, if you are summoning on this banner, I wish you guys good luck. Hopefully you get it in a single pull or a single 10 pull and conserve all those valuable Chrono Stones for a future banner. Now, one thing I will say is that between the 2 Faithfuls, this Trio of the Moon and Sea definitely feels better than the other one, just because unless you have the other 2 singers, you have 3 chances of getting a singer as opposed to 1. And again, I must emphasize, each of these singers do different things. Don't feel that, oh, if I have no singers, I must get AS Milsha. They are very different. If anything, I would say that Piece of Cup is probably one of the easiest ones to use. AS Mysterio is also fairly straightforward and gives you some offensive capability. And obviously, like I said, AS Milsha feels like the most complex out of the three, although it doesn't mean she's any worse. Anyways, hopefully you've updated by now and are starting the conclusion. Being that's pretty late for me already, and I've had a pretty busy month with just, end of school kind of events for the children. I'm not sure how far I'll get ahead in this game, but I'll, make sure you start it and get that 100 Chronostones. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.